Hello, and welcome to my testing evidence video for my NEA project. The overall goal of the project is to create a 2D platforming game, which physics students can use to learn about various forces. To show that I have achieved this goal, I will go through the program and my core list of objectives, talking about them in further detail where appropriate. To start things off, this is the game's title screen, which is the first thing the player will see when opening the game. The text on the title screen is due to be changed in the future, so it introduces the program and its purpose to the player before they get started. Pressing the spacebar will allow the player to start the game, spawning the player character, which will be referred to as the ball going forward, in the top left of the game's window, and generating the first screen, or room, of the game's level. The level is split up into various rooms, which each take up the program's window when they are loaded. When the player leaves the edge of the screen, a subroutine dedicated to the room next to the one the player has just left is executed, generating the structure of this new room and updating a variable which tracks the room the player is currently in. Once its subroutine finishes its execution, the player's X and Y coordinates are updated, so they start on the side of the screen opposite to the one they went through to leave the previous room. This means, for example, if in the first room the player moves right and into the second room, they will start on the left side of the screen in that room. The player has three main controls: moving left using the left arrow key or A, moving right using the right arrow key or D, and jumping using the spacebar. While one of the movement keys is held, the player will move in that direction, accelerating until they either hit a wall or reach the marble top speed. When a movement key is released during movement, the player will gradually slow down until their acceleration returns to zero. This deceleration process can be cancelled at any time by pressing the movement key again during the process. Additionally, the player can only move in one direction at a time. This means that inputs from the left movement keys won't be registered if the player is holding one of the right movement keys, and vice versa. Finally, the player will only jump for each individual press of the spacebar, and therefore if the spacebar is held, the ball will only jump once. Each piece of terrain can be collided with in three different ways: by landing on top of them, which allows the player to jump and move, by hitting their sides, setting the player's total acceleration in the direction they were moving to zero, and by hitting their roofs, setting the player's acceleration along the y-axis to zero before they start falling. Another thing to note is that many rooms have text boxes inside them, giving the player detailed information on how the elements of the game function, along with what forces the game's mechanics represent. While the player will normally collide with each piece of terrain the ball overlaps, each side of a terrain block can be set to not have its collision algorithm activate when the ball touches it, allowing the ball to pass straight through the terrain block from this side. Pieces of terrain with sides that allow for this are known as semi-solids. While the ball is on top of one of the ramps in the game, it will slowly move towards the ramp's bottom. This is done through an algorithm which adds on to the player's movement speed while they are on top of the ramp and stationary. This movement speed is slowly reduced back to zero when the player leaves the ramp or accelerates in the opposite direction. On top of that, the ball will move more slowly when climbing up the ramp, and will move more quickly when going down it. All of these concepts represent the pull of gravity on the ball while it is travelling across non-flat terrain. When the player comes into contact with a key, they will hold onto it. While the key is held by the player, locked barriers can be removed from the screen by moving into them. Doing so will remove the key from the player's inventory, meaning that in order to remove other locked barriers, they will have to find another one. If the player moves into a locked barrier without a key, they will collide with it in the same way that they would with terrain. Additionally, text boxes may have different text if the player enters a room while holding a key compared to when the player enters the same room without one. Normally, the text box in the following room would tell the player that they need a key in order to open the barrier, and should go through the path to the left of that room to find one. However, as the player is already holding a key, the text box instead congratulates them, and instructs them to unlock the barrier by moving into it. The terrain the ball is currently on top of is ice, which has lower friction compared to regular terrain. This means that the ball will have a lower top speed and will take longer to accelerate and decelerate while it is travelling across ice compared to when it's travelling across regular terrain. When the player collides with a hazard, their speed values will be reset, and their coordinates will be updated so they are as close to the point they entered the room from as possible, while still being fully visible on the screen. Additionally, hazards have methods which allow them to move at set speeds in set patterns. Each moving hazard is given the furthest coordinates it can move to and the coordinates it starts at as attributes, which are checked against the hazard's current position to determine whether it should continue moving in the same direction or start moving in the opposite direction. The ball will sink when it lands in water, falling down to the ground more slowly than it would while above the surface. Furthermore, while underwater the ball will move more slowly to the left and right, and will jump much higher, representing the effects of water resistance and buoyant forces acting on the ball respectively. Normally, the player would have to grab the key from the room to the right of this one in order to proceed. However, I'm going to use a function to give the player a key, which will be removed in the final version of the game, so I can proceed with the demonstration, as that room doesn't feature anything I haven't talked about. When the player finishes a game, they will be returned to the title screen, with the game telling them that they've won and giving them the option to play the game again by pressing the spacebar. In the final version of the game, there will be a quiz in between the previous room and this win screen to test the player on the material they've been taught. This concludes the testing evidence video for my project.